off the bat, one of the main challenges I think for me is students aren't prepared for life outside of education. A way we can combat this, I think, would be having a bit more within the curriculum for students to explore life outside of exams, and reforming the assessment system that we've got going at the moment. Students are really just taught for exams. And we've seen from a lot of data, there is a massive skills shortage at the moment. But yes, preparing students for life outside of education helps. So maybe having a bit more in the curriculum about budgeting, about debts, finances, mortgages, actual skills like confidence building, public speaking, oration. Those really do help.
Welcome to Rethinking Education. Education's critical friend.
In case people aren't familiar with you or the work that you do yet, could you please just provide a very quick sort of introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ife Obasa. I'm really honored to be on the Rethinking Education podcast. So I am currently a fourth-year law student at the University of Southampton and aspiring solicitor. But outside of that, I have a real passion for education and for young people. And I currently sit on a few youth boards on the youth advisory boards. And then also I'm a public speaker and an education consultant. So I deliver a lot of talks, keynote, panel talks on various different topics, and also provide advisory consults to companies, leaders that are looking to tap into the value of their younger employees at their companies.
There you go. Interesting stuff. And indeed, you spoke at the Rethinking Ed conference last year, and I would like to ask you about that in a few moments. But let's get our ducks in a row. So you're in your fourth year of
Yes.
a law degree, and that's relevant, isn't it? Because your third year, you had a year out to do a work placement. Is that correct?
A work placement, exactly.
And what was your work placement?
So I took a year out. For context, for anyone who doesn't understand what a placement is, usually you do that after you've completed 2 years of your degree, sorry. So I'd finished 2 years of my law degree, and I was actually meant to go on a year abroad, but that didn't work out. And it was just so fortunate enough that the company I was interning with during that summer decided to give me a place at their company and do a placement. So the placement was after my second year. I was working for 6 months as a paralegal. I was working in-house for a fintech company. And then the last 3 months of my placement, I was a court usher in one of my local county courts, assisting with cases, with judges, when they're having the hearings. So it was a very wholesome experience. But in a nutshell, that's what has met my law degree is 4 years as opposed to it being a 3-year degree.
Okay, thank you. And this, when we spoke last week, you sort of raised this as a thing that you would like to talk about, because it's something that doesn't really get as much airtime as it needs to, in your view. So what is it that you want to expand upon about this whole idea about work placements, and in particular, I think it's about coming back from work placements.
Coming back, yeah. So I think it's two big themes for me. It's one that placements are not spoken about enough, at least with courses like my own law degrees. I know there are courses like engineering and things that it's a lot more well known for, but at least with my course, it wasn't. I didn't even know it was an option I could have taken if it's not because my placement didn't happen. So I think the first theme is that we really need to emphasize practical work experience at all levels. And we'll probably discuss this as we go on, but I'm really big on work experience for secondary school students, work experience all the way throughout the education system. But primarily when you're at university, it matters even more when you're getting experience in the workplace. And I can't stress enough or emphasize enough how beneficial the placement was for me. It gave me insight into the legal industry. It opened up my mind to what I could consider doing after university. And I was able to build those relationships within the workplace. So I think my first theme is that universities, if they're not already, should emphasize placements as much as they do year abroads. Because right now, I think there's a lot more emphasis on going a year abroad, which is fantastic. I wanted to do that. But also there is a benefit, and there are benefits to going on a placement. And then the second theme is that actually, when you do go on a placement, the other thing that we don't discuss is the readjustment to university life. You know, you've just gone out on a year working a full 9 to 5 in some instances. Other people might vary differently with the timings, but you were working for a full year and you're now having to readjust to university, going to lectures and attending tutorials, seminars, giving in assignments. It is a lot. And I will be honest, when I first came back, that October period was very hard because I was also doing things outside of university. So everything just felt like a lot. But one advice or, you know, bits of knowledge I'd give to anyone who's on a placement would be to ease yourself into it as early as you can. So that summer period before you return back to university, try and start reading academic articles if you can, or try and start getting into the swing of things with regards to your degree before you start, so that you can mentally prepare yourself. Okay, I'm going back to university. And I think another practical tip I'd also give as well is do seek support. I have to say my year in employment team were really good at ensuring that everyone felt comfortable returning back. They had a social, they were checking in on us, and we had a PowerPoint sent over to us just with various links of different departments in the university that we could reach out to. So I'd definitely say my biggest piece of advice to anybody that's on a placement and will be returning back to university, ease yourself back into university life as early as possible and really do rely on the support that your university will give you.
You're right. It doesn't receive. I've never really heard anybody else talking about this before, and it's another transition, isn't it? And people often use the word transition, and it's almost a euphemism because transition sounds like it's all very managed, and we're going to help you transition from this to this. And actually, it's just like it's really jarring. Like, whoa, you're doing something completely different now. Yeah. And good luck with transitioning up that big step change or back down that big step change. So thank you. That's really interesting. And good sage advice. And so going back to the first point about just like the importance of this, it seems to be something that's quite undervalued, even at university level. I think that I don't know the data on it, but my sense is that it's a minority of courses that offer placement years. I think that most courses don't. I don't know whether that's true. Do you have any sense of that?
I don't know the stats, you know, from the top of my head, but just from general consensus of friends that I've spoken to at other universities that have graduated, a lot of them said either the university didn't offer it for their course, a placement, and that could be for various reasons. Maybe the university doesn't have links with certain companies, or actually the university just doesn't have the space to facilitate that specific course, you know, going out for a year. But I think the issue is sometimes universities do actually offer these placement years, but they're not, you know, promoted enough. You know, students don't know about it. And so, you know, students just go through the university process not knowing that there would have been that option. However, though, I do say this to say that there are also universities that don't offer it. So some of my friends that studied law at other universities didn't have the option of ever doing a placement. It was either a year abroad or you continue with your degree. So I do think there should be a renewed focus on placements as the years go on, that actually there are benefits to students going out on a year in the industry, learning, relearning at times, opening up their mind to new perspectives, opening up your hinterland to new areas that you didn't even know were areas that you could have considered. And then also it's that relationship building relationships, connections with people in the workplace, outside of the workplace, professional etiquette. There are loads of things you pick up on the go, you know, going to socials with colleagues, being able to handle yourself in those environments, having deadlines, and how do you balance multiple deadlines? You're not at university anymore where maybe you could apply for what you'd call special considerations or an extension. You are, you know, expected to provide the work when they have asked for it at a certain deadline. So all of those things are very beneficial, soft skills that you pick up. But then also there's just the element of personal development, the growth. It was in my placement I decided actually I wanted to change from becoming a barrister to, you know, changing over to becoming a solicitor. So there's so many things you pick up in a placement, but I would say from what I've spoken to of friends, it is quite split. Some universities actually did offer it for their course, they just didn't know about it. And others, it's actually the university didn't offer it for their course.
Right, there you go. Interesting. So I googled it just now while you were chatting, and I want to ask you about that decision, by the way, about switching from barrister to solicitor shortly, because I'm interested. But there's some weird. There's some stats. There's this piece that was written on the HEPI blog, the Higher Education Policy Institute, and it says that. That data shows that there was an increase of the number of the students enrolling on sandwich courses on a 4-year course where the third year is in industry had increased by 59% between 2009-10 and 2017-18. And then that sounds like a lot, but that doesn't mean 59% of courses. It just means that the number of courses, which was already quite low, had increased by 59%. Yes. But that's belied by this other data that says that excluding part-time students, the percentage of students actually completing a placement was 8.2% in 2005-06 and still only 8.6% in 2014-15. Don't have more recent data for now. So it's fewer than 10% of students are doing this. And like you say, maybe there are maybe it's an option for more students to do a placement if they were to ask for it and to go and bang on the right door in their university, whoever's in charge of work experience placements. But it's not happening by default at all. And thinking back to my own degree, I can remember just falling off the end of it and having no clue about what would come next. Like a year in industry would have been amazing, just to get a sense as to what it is that you're doing at uni and how it joins up with the real world. Because I literally had no idea. I sort of just worked in unskilled jobs after graduating with not a bad degree, because I just literally didn't know what my options were. Like there was no careers advice really around at that time. It was a big sort of black hole. So yeah, interesting.
It really is. And like I said, I did not know it was an option. And I think my law school will beg to differ and say that they did have a talk, and they probably did, and I just missed it. But I think not having one talk is not enough. It should be something that is a reoccurring conversation. And I'm really proud actually of the year in employment team at my university. I really am. From coming back, they've had a series of talks, and they're still having talks to enlighten students about the benefits of it. So I've spoken on a few panels for them where I've explained my experience of getting the placement, during the placement, and after the placement. So I think if more universities can adopt what my university are doing, where we're going into different faculties, speaking to students, telling them about it, I think it really will help in the long run and open up students' minds to the potential that actually I may want to do an additional year as opposed to just doing 3 or however long the course is for.
Yeah, sure, yes. And so, and likewise, I think that the numbers have sharply declined at secondary schools, haven't they? It's quite a hassle. There's quite a lot of work that goes into organizing work experience placements. It takes a lot of bandwidth, and I think that one of the effects of all of the cuts and austerity that schools have been through, their budget cuts year on year, is that people just aren't able to resource the work experience admin. Exactly. So it's just not happening, but it's such a shame.
It really is. It really is. Because time and time again, you'll hear that teachers are saying that there isn't enough funding. They don't have a big enough budget to send students out. There are loads of things that really grieve me sometimes when I think about it, because there's nothing more valuable than practical experience. This is just in life in general. And so when it comes to work experience, what better than for a student to go into a company or a workplace and get to know a bit more about, investment bankers or whatever it is that they're into. So it is a real shame. And I think we'll probably touch on this as we go further along as to why I really believe that, if we can have the 4 main systems that I believe: government, we're having employers, we're having teachers, and we're actually having students working together. And I always say the bonus in my little square is actually the parents as well. If everyone can work together, we really can try in a way to better reform the education system, but also as well to help with funding, to close the skills gap. There's so many things that really could start to turn the cog in the system if all of those different branches could work together. So yes, I think we'll probably touch on that. So that's just, I guess, a little taster for what's to come.
Yeah, you're talking my language. I absolutely agree that that's squarely what needs to happen. I think that the main problem that we have is that all of those different groups of people, well, government, they're involved in making policy, obviously, but employers, schools, students, parents, not so much. And all of that richness of the lived experience of all of those people, so-called people use this language of experts by experience now, right?
Yes.
And they are right, and all of that expertise is not being factored into the policymaking process. You get a small number of policymakers who are often, from quite a select group of like sort of subsection of society, often privately educated. They've done internships or whatever. Maybe this is a bit of a sweeping generalization, but like people, it's not your everyday kid from the local comp who goes and becomes a policymaker in Whitehall, right? It's a small percentage of people, maybe people with political ambitions themselves, and they are interesting people with valuable ideas to offer, but they are not representative of the wider population, right? And I know we're gonna talk about representation shortly. Super important, this stuff.
It really is.
And the other thing on the student thing is that I think that the work placements need to come early, like in year 10 or year 9, maybe. Like I can remember when I was a secondary school teacher, I had to go and visit a student on work placement, and it was they did theirs in year 11. It was like in January or February in year 11, and I taught her science, and her work experience placement was to work in a shop in the local shopping precinct, which she'd always thought that that was what she was going to do. She was just going to, like keep sociable hours, and she'd be able to, see her friends and what have you. And I went to visit her, and she hated it so much. She was just like, and she was really upset. She was like, it's too late to change. She was like, I need to work harder for my exams. Working in a shop is unbelievably boring. Being on your feet all day, like just hanging clothes up, like there's got to be more to life than this. But she was like, I've got 2 months before my GCSEs, and it's too late to do anything now. So I agree with you that we need to see more of it and earlier.
We really do. We really do. I always say the earlier we can invest in young people, the better. There is no really too young to start investing. And year 10, I even think is still like, that's even late in my opinion. I think really from year 7, year 8, there should be, it doesn't have to be work experience, but day trips to just see a company, to actually start getting, their minds thinking about life outside of the education system. Because I'm a big believer of we shouldn't be going through school or going through education just to prepare us for exams or just to prepare us for that formal stage. After education, there is a life, and some people decide, actually, I don't even want to go to university. I may want to do a degree apprenticeship. Actually, I may not even want to do that at all. I may just want to explore maybe gifts that I have and maybe run my own enterprise or run a business. And actually, the earlier we can get them thinking about life outside of the formal education system, the better, because it opens up their mind to think, actually, I think I might be better suited to this, or I would really like to explore this more. And then we can encourage skills like research, where you go online and you research industries that you may potentially be looking out for. It fosters conversations about careers. And I know as well, there's also been a decrease in careers officers at schools. Careers guidance for many different reasons. One of them, again, is funding. So the more we can have those things in place, the easier it is on schools, and the better it is for students to start thinking about themselves outside of just formal education.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. I was just wondering, there's an idea that I used to think about a lot. I haven't thought about it for a while, and I actually don't know what I think about it anymore. But I just want to run it past you and see what you think. See if we could blow some dust off this idea and see if there's any merit in it. So I remember when I was teaching at a school in quite a challenging area, quite an under-resourced area. It had fairly low attainment. It was lower than average attainment at this school, and there were a number of kids at that school who just were not into school at all. Like it was really, really hard to get through to them. They were just not interested, and they wanted to go and work in whatever their families were doing. Often they'll be like, my dad has a trade, he's a tiler, he's whatever, carpet shop, whatever it might be. I want to go and work for them, and all they want to do is that. And it's clear that that's what their mind is set on, and they're just tolerating the rest of their time at school. And indeed they do. They go off and do that, and then they are perfectly happy. And I remember there was one kid, such a challenging student to have in the lesson. He was like bouncing off the walls. He was running in and out of lessons, being chased around the school by teachers. He was just like very, very challenging behavior that he presented with. And I remember seeing him a couple of years later, and he was a scaffolder, and they were actually doing some work on the school. And he also came bounding up to me with this big grin on his face, like give me this big handshake. He's like, "How are you doing? It's nice to see you." And he just looked sort of so fulfilled and happy. And I just sort of thought, would it have been so bad if he'd have left school at 14 and hadn't had to go through that 2-year period of himself finding it being in this state of daily conflict, also disrupting lots of other kids' educations? And what I thought you could have would be to have like 2 years of vouchers. Right? I've got like I say, I don't know whether this will work logistically. It might be difficult to make happen. But if you say to kids at age 14, you've got now the participation rate age is raised to 18, isn't it? So you can say you've got 4 more years of free education. It's going to be state funded. You can use them now if you want. You can do your GCSEs and then your A-levels, or if you want, go and get a job and you can use them later. And maybe you will never want to use them, and that's okay as well if you choose not to. But you could do it when you're good and ready, because I think that the rationale for that idea is exactly a bit like that girl experience with the shop, that some people go out into the workplace, they find that actually they when you're young, 200 quid a week in your pocket is loads of money when you're still living with your mum and dad. But when you're trying to pay bills, it doesn't even cover them. And so people go out and the increments for, if you're doing unskilled labor, the pay doesn't increase by that much as you get older, right? And so people by then will go, oh, do you know what, actually I really do need to go and get my qualifications. And when they're 18 or 19 or up to 25, say, I think that you would find that they would work really hard with their remaining years of free education, because they could see the value of it in a way that they couldn't when they were 14. Like I say, I don't know whether this is something that I still adhere to, but I'm just interested to hear your thoughts. What do you think?
I mean, in a way, I do understand. I do understand the merits of that idea. But I'm also one of those that I had quite positive experience in school, and I've always been quite a firm believer of everyone deserves an education. And also, it becomes a choice if the child wants to stay on post, I think it's sixth form, like 16 to 18, you can decide if you want to leave that. But I really do believe everyone should have an education. And the vouchers is a good idea in that actually, if you decide that, you know what, this school thing is just not for me, and you want to go out and make something of yourself, and then you can come back and spend the voucher, in a way, that's good. But then I can also see from the other angle where it's like, actually, there shouldn't be a choice up until 16 at least. Go through the formal education stage, get an education, even if it may be a bit challenging, get an education, learn, within that setting, then you can then move out. And the reason why I'm kind of in between both of that is actually the education system as it is now doesn't allow for creativity. And so for students who may struggle, they only see it as, actually, I just want a way out of this. I don't want to be in education because there's nothing in it for me. But if we were to have a system that was a bit more creative, and I don't say this that the system doesn't have its merits, there are very many positive aspects of it. But one of the reasons why a lot of students give up on school earlier, minus loads of different factors, sometimes it's because of the way that being taught, the syllabus, the assessment doesn't include creativity. There isn't that aspect where they can grasp the subject or the module, whatever it is they're learning, in a way that's different to the stereotypical of how we're taught. And so some students just feel like, I'm dumb, I don't feel like I can do this, I'm not smart, I just want to leave. But actually, every child has a unique, I believe, has a unique selling point, has that unique intelligence. intelligence, but sometimes it's the way we go about unlocking it for them that matters. And if we have at some point maybe missed the mark, then students feel like, actually, I don't think I can do score. And from my experience, when I've tutored students, I've tutored a few students who were very, very naughty. But one thing that I noticed was once I finally got through to them, it was because of factors like home life, environment, loads of different things that were playing into it. And they needed someone to tell them, no, I believe you can do this. Like, you really need to believe in yourself before anyone else can believe in you. But I'm telling you, as your tutor, you can do this. And I think it really did make a difference. And I know teachers are stretched. There's so many stats out there, so many reports, showing that teachers are stressed. A lot of teachers are leaving the profession. So we can't count on them to be the ones teaching, marking, and also to be the support system, and also to be the cheerleaders. But we really do need to think about how we can motivate, empower them, but then also involve some creativity into the syllabus. Because I think in an instance like the young guy, even if he did decide not to go on to sixth form, if there was a way, maybe we could have like an assessment where he was building things, it could have maybe shown him that actually this is something I really want to do, that would have led him down the scaffolding route, which he still found in the end. But those are ways, for instance, that we can try to help students who aren't performing as well, and who also are disruptive, because I really do believe sometimes it's not because they want to be. There are many different factors at play, but teachers, again, don't have the time to sometimes find out what's causing it because they're so stretched.
Yeah.
I admit that was a long answer. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the voucher.
No, it's interesting. Thank you. Thinking about it now and reflecting on what you just said, I think that 16 to 18 would be the time, right? So at the moment, we've got this 16 to 18 thing. Now that the leaving age is 18, if you say to kids at 16, you've got 2 years of free education left, you can use it now, or you can use it up to the age of 25, say, something like that, so that they can go back on their decision. Again, logistically, I don't know how that would work with enrollment numbers and things. It's going to take some working through. But anyway, all right, thank you for indulging me on that. So I want to come on to the representation thing in a moment. But first, let's just go back to what you mentioned earlier about how you switched recently. Doing the work experience placement made you change from wanting to be a barrister to be a solicitor. Yeah. First of all, just because people often aren't sure about the difference between those two things. So please could you just explain the difference between being a solicitor and being a barrister, and then why the switch?
Why the switch, yeah. So in very layman terms, not to confuse anyone, a barrister is a lawyer that advocates in the courtroom. So their journey with a potential client really starts from the courtroom, So usually the way the system works is the solicitor does the work with the client. Usually the law firms will represent the client and have all the client meetings, sort all the deals. Sorry, that's in the commercial sense, but at least we'll meet with the client and have that relationship. Then the solicitor refers a case to the barrister. And usually it's actually sometimes at court, maybe sometimes beforehand, the barrister would have met with the client, but it's usually from the courtroom or, around court time. That's when the barrister starts to, meet with the client, interact with the client. But a barrister advocates in the courtroom, and a solicitor is the one that, builds the relationship with the client prior to the courtroom, if it's to go to court. And one of the other big differences between the two are barristers are self-employed and they work in chambers, and solicitors are employed and they work in law firms. So where a solicitor has the comfort of being employed, a barrister is self-employed. And they essentially work, individually, but all barristers work in chambers. You can sometimes get in-house barristers. You can get sometimes a barrister that works within a law firm. It's not common, but it does happen. And you can also get solicitor advocates. So solicitors that have the license or certification, I'm not using the correct word, but are able to also advocate in court. You can also get that as well. In terms of why I made the switch, I was very set on the bar for a very long time. I thought, I really want to advocate in court. I love speaking. I have the ability to orate, communicate. So I thought I wanted to do this. And I've always said I want to represent people that can't speak for themselves. I just have always had that ability to, speak up and fight for people. And so for me, I was naturally more inclined to the barrister route for a very long time. But it wasn't until my placement year that I actually made the switch. And for some people, it's like, oh, why would you make the switch when, you know, you communicate so well? Why would you not want to go down the barrister route? But actually, when I was working as a paralegal, I really enjoyed building relationships. In that instance, it was with entities, because we were a fintech company. It was really, really nice, you know, working with entities, drafting the contracts for them, negotiating contract terms. I thought this is something actually I would want to do, building the relationship with the client, or in that instance, it was with the entity, actually seeing the relationships through. I felt like it was more suited to me. And then also, you know, the aspect of working with other lawyers as well, other trainees in a law firm, felt a bit more like this is something I wanted to do. And so that was the choice that I made. And I think it was solidified when I then went to work in the court. As I was speaking to the different judges that I would court usher for, some of them had the barrister route as a qualification, some of them had the solicitor route. And it was nice getting to understand why they made the switch, you know, how they became judges. So I think the placement year really shaped my mind that actually I may not want to do the barrister route, it's more the solicitor route. And that was all because of practical work experience. I've had tons of work experience right up from year 10 till now. And all of those were able to inform different decisions that I had. Actually, it's the bar route, or actually, it's the solicitor route. But my placement year was really the defining moment for me to decide it's the solicitor route.
Interesting. Another ringing endorsement for work experience placements. Because it's like, otherwise, how would you make that? It seemed like a good basis. You was like, I like to advocate for people. I can use my voice. I want to be, and there's a bit more, maybe it feels like there's a bit more drama in the bar side, would you say? Is that something that appeals to people, that they see themselves as being like doing the zinging, like closing statement?
People just have unrealistic expectations sometimes of the law because of, you know, to be expected TV. I remember I wanted to be a doctor when I was younger, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to be a doctor because I used to watch Holby City and Casualty, but it's nothing like that. And the same for the law. A lot of the TV shows as well that people watch are American, so it's even slightly different. There's the different nuances. In America, they don't have the split between barristers and solicitor. You're just an attorney. So there are loads of things that I'm not quite sure that's the same here. But yes, honestly, I would just say if you can't do a placement, just trying to get work experience in any capacity is always the best.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the representation thing. So you came to the conference in September, and your talk was called, let me see, I've got it right here. Why representation matters in education. No, it was stronger than that. It was why representation matters now more than ever. What? Wait a second. Sorry, just give me a sec. There it is. No, I've got it. Why? Go on, you do it.
No, you can say it since you've got it up.
Why representation matters for the future of education.
Yeah.
That was it. Because you changed the title, I remember. That's why I had two different ones.
I did too, yeah.
So I wasn't able to make it to your session. I was running around like a crazy person on that day. So what was that session about? Why were you making this case, and what did you talk about in your session?
Yeah. So for a long time now, if anyone follows me on LinkedIn, one of the topics I do talk about a lot is representation within education and benefits of why we need it. And we often talk a lot about the future, young people are the future, but I really believe actually let's start talking about the now. You know, they're here now. And the reason why I titled the talk, why representation matters for the future of education, is because I always like to think about things quite forward-looking. I have a very futuristic point of view. So every time I'm building and working with things or concepts, I like to think about it as well, like how could it apply in the future? And for me, I really believe that it would make a world of a difference if we had more representation within 3 prongs of society with regards to education. And the way I split the talk up was representation in the curriculum, representation in the teacher force, and representation in decision making. And I think for me, it's just a topic so dear to my heart because I've seen bits and bobs of what it could look like if we had representation in the education system. And so that's why I'm a bit more like, we need it. But then also I know the benefits of why having representation in general within society helps other people identify more with that concept or that thing. And with regards to education, education affects everyone in every capacity. Whether you have gone through it or not, whether you are going through it currently, everyone is affected by education. And I think it's only right that we have an education system that is holistic and that incorporates all aspects of society, because I think sometimes people can feel like they're neglected and they don't see themselves within the education system. And on a whole, I think the talk went well. I was quite excited with the group. Everyone was vulnerable. Everyone really opened up and shared their perspectives on the topic. And in preparing for the talk, I really wanted to ensure the space was safe enough for people to talk about their experiences, because sometimes people don't always feel comfortable about sharing things for various reasons, but I really wanted it to be a safe space. But my 3 reasons and the 3 factors as to why representation matters for education is because it fosters cultural sensitivity. It enables decision makers specifically to be a bit more sensitive of different cultures, to be a bit more sensitive of the different needs within society, to be a bit more sensitive to the fact that not everyone comes from the same background, ethnicity, class as some of the people who are in these spaces come from. The other reason why I believe representation matters as well within the education system is it also helps learners to engage more with learning. When you are being taught about something so far removed from your daily life, it gives you a new sense of gratitude. It gives you a new sense of understanding that actually there is life beyond what I'm currently going through. And a practical example was with my GCSE syllabus for English literature. One of the books that we read actually was a book by Chinua Achebe, which is an African, he's an African literature author. That was the word I was looking for. And the book we read was Things Fall Apart. And it revolutionized the entire class. One, because I think everyone was kind of like, I'm a bit shocked that we're, studying a book like this, an African literature book in English. But 2, I think everyone became a bit more aware of the fact that people come from different places, different countries, that actually, and, Chinua Achebe wrote really vividly about the African system, villages, and their way of life, their culture. I think everyone in my class was able to appreciate, that. And also as well, it touched on aspects of history that we don't always talk about, colonialism. And it was really nice because everyone in that classroom was affected by that book in one way or another. In my instance, I'm African, so I was able to really appreciate the book. But for everyone else, everyone was able to take out different things from reading that book. But at the end of the day, it was a new form of cultural sensitivity that everyone got from it, understanding, a bit more aware, because I think sometimes students, kids, we all go into school and we sometimes don't take in that actually I'm sitting next to someone who comes from a different country to me and speaks a whole different language to me. That is so cool within itself. So these are other reasons why I believe representation matters. And I think third, why representation matters is we can't continue to create legislation, have policies, and they are still not inclusive enough. They still don't represent the diverse needs of society. Whether people like it or not, society is constantly changing. And it is for us to ensure that education is at the forefront of that change across the globe, not just in the UK. This is everywhere. Education is one of those, I don't even want to say concepts, but it's a thing that is constantly evolving and changing. And if we really want to see the system, the people within it, policymakers, teachers, students really thrive within this, what you want to call system, there has to be representation. I know for myself, having a Black maths teacher when I was in secondary school really helped. It was nice to see that, oh, okay, this is really nice to see that there is someone that looks like me that is teaching me. And it's not also just about race, it's also inclusivity. I I read a report, we don't have many people reporting disability within education. And I think one of the reasons could be it's not spoken about, one. Also, there are not many adjustments that are made for, let's say, disabled teachers, or there isn't anything that is out there for them. And so I think a lot of people don't report that they are struggling with a disability or they're neurodivergent. So there's so many aspects that, we can include when it comes to representation. But I think there needs to be the representation in the curriculum, the syllabus, what the students are learning, representation with the teacher workforce, because right now the stats show it is not diverse enough, and there are actually more women in the teacher workforce than men, from the stat that I read recently. Then also, though, surprisingly, when it comes to the senior leadership level, there are actually more men occupying that role within the workforce. And so, there are loads of things that we need to work on when it comes to that dichotomy there. And third is with the decision making. There's a quote that I can't quite find now that spoke about us having decision makers that are currently only from a certain pool within society. But actually, it would make a world of a difference if we had decision makers that were representing different prongs of society. Because I think sometimes people just switch off at the very fact that the people that are making the laws, they don't look like me. They're not even my gender. Actually, I'd rather not even, engage. But I'm here to say that it's possible, and I really believe it will happen, that we are starting to see more representation, but it needs to happen a lot quicker, I believe.
Wow.
Yes.
What an answer. I had loads of questions going into this section, and you just answered them all very eloquently. That's amazing. So to recap, if I may, so you were saying that there's three main reasons that we need to be doing more to see. And so representation is essentially about when the demographics in schools, so that the demographics of a student body are represented in what they're seeing in terms of the curriculum, in terms of leadership, in terms of policies and so on, and decision making. And so you said there's three reasons why we need to see this, right? Number one, that representation fosters greater cultural sensitivity, that you're able to understand things from different people's perspectives, like you say, if they're from different backgrounds, if they're disabled, if they're from different racial, ethnic backgrounds, different genders and so on, that they have different needs that need to be met, and worldviews that need to be respected. That's been playing out in the news in an interesting way this week. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. So it fosters cultural sensitivity. The second reason is that it helps learners to engage more in their learning. And you gave that I want to read that book, Things Fall Apart.
Things Fall Apart. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll check that out. And you can see that it's obviously the case that if you can see yourself, if you can see your own culture reflected in the material that you're learning about, you're going to be more engaged in it. It seems like a no-brainer. And the third one is that we have decision making that is not representative at the moment, and it's not inclusive, and that can't continue, and education needs to be at the forefront of that change. Is that an okay summary of your?
Yes, no, it is. And I deliberately chose three because I thought, let's not, I could go on and on. But I think those three for me are, my three main reasons. There are many reasons, but those are my three main reasons.
Yeah, and you can see how they interlink as well. Like they cross-reference those three. And you talked about the three major areas, because that was one of my first questions that I was going to ask, is like, where are you talking about in terms of representation? Is this about leadership? Is it about at things like conferences? Is it in the curriculum? Is it around decision making? And it's all of the above, right? All of the above.
All of it, yes.
And so where do you think we are currently in this country? So we're like, let's talk about England. We could maybe talk about an international perspective as well, if you like, but let's just start with this country. Where do you think we are currently in terms of representation compared with, say, 5 or 10 years ago? Do you think that things are moving in a good direction, or are you not seeing the change that you would like to see currently?
I think it's moving slowly. We are seeing, I'm quite optimistic, so I don't really like to look at things with a negative outlook. I think it is slowly, starting to change. We are starting to see more representation. And like I said, when I was at school, there were a fair few teachers that weren't the ordinary, very different to what I kind of expected going into school. So that was, I guess, some change. In terms of leadership at my school, there was representation. I'd definitely say we had a lot of women leaders. And again, that was really nice for us to see that. Oh, wow, it's so nice to see X person as our head teacher or X person as our head mistress. There is some change going on. And I'm careful to say that I wouldn't say it's happening rapidly, but it is slow and it is happening. Definitely. When I was at the Rethinking Ed conference and I'm speaking to some people definitely agreed that yeah, there is, but it's just not happening as quick enough. And also, I think as well, it just doesn't help with what's been going on, these past couple of years, COVID and politics. It has really, almost like made people grow very weary, tired of things as they are. And so actually people have disengaged. And so where you would have people a bit more proactive and actually, let's see how we can change things and let's just see how we can provide solutions, people have kind of drawn back. And I'm not saying that this is the case for everyone, because there's still lots of people, lots of organizations driving change. But I'm talking about for the general public, because like I said, education affects everyone. For the general public, I think people have disengaged because of various things that have happened in, our political discourse over the past couple of years. And so people are just like, well, it doesn't affect me, I'm just going to draw back. But actually, this is the time where we need everyone to, get involved. And it doesn't have to be on a national level. It doesn't even have to be public. It could be behind closed doors. You are, maybe helping out with a friend's, child's education. Or maybe you're having conversations with anyone that that's into policy making. If you know anyone that works at the Department of Education, there's so many ways we can get involved and try to start steering representation. I think on a higher level, decision making, we're still not there. There are so many committee meetings, select committee meetings that I read about or see, and it's all men, all whites, all middle-aged. Yeah. So there is still a lot of scope. And like I said, it is changing, but there is still a wide amount of scope. And I think it shouldn't be that you call upon people when you want to fit, or, meet a certain criteria. That's when you call upon people, but actually that, no, let's just as a whole ensure that the system is representative. So it is changing. The conferences I attend or the panels I speak on, I am starting to see a bit more, but it's still not there yet. I am sometimes one of the few of my, background that are in these places, but it is changing. It is slowly getting there. Mm-hmm. I do believe, hopefully, within the next couple of years, it will start to pick up a lot faster. And I really believe it will pick up faster with people like myself, younger people who are stepping out and saying, actually, I'm going to be bold about this. Let's change this. Let's do this. Because sometimes it takes the younger generation for other generations to wake up and be like, actually, yeah, let's get on board.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way that change works, isn't it? Like, you don't get this linear effect. It's like it creeps along really, really slow first, and then all of a sudden it goes exponential. If you're lucky, right? If you reach a tipping point, and not everything does go exponential, but if you look at all kinds of different examples of like the numbers of people who adopt a particular type of technology, or if you look at, I saw a similar graph about this, but Mr. Beast, like the most watched person on YouTube. His YouTube views was like really, really low for about 7 years, and then it all of a sudden
shot up. I remember reading that.
And it's a bit of a weird analogy, I realize, but in change management generally, there's this idea of, have you come across the idea of diffusion of innovations? It's like, it's a theory of how ideas spread, and it's like, so you have these early adopters And what's interesting is that you don't need to get that many people on board with an idea in order for it to tip. The tipping point isn't at like 50%. It's around something like 15 to 20%. If you can get there sort of, 1 in 5 people to be actively promoting this agenda in meetings, in committees that they're involved in conferences that they're involved in, and so on, then we can find that tipping point will happen. But it's not a straightforward thing. And I was going to ask you about barriers to representation, or barriers to there being greater representation. But barriers is a bit of a passive word. It just sort of sounds like, there's issues to get over, but there is sometimes like active resistance as well, isn't there? To this, for example, in terms of decolonizing the curriculum and having a more representative curriculum, there are people who think that shouldn't happen, or who push back against it at least. And so I wonder whether could we just take, it's hard to talk about representation as a whole because it plays out differently in those different domains. So let's just briefly look at each of those 3 things: curriculum, the teaching workforce, and the policy-making environment, decision makers. What are the barriers / sources of resistance to progress in these areas, and how might we address them? So let's look at curriculum first. What do you think the barriers are to a more representative curriculum?
I think one of them is just time to research materials that can make up this representative curriculum. Till today, I don't even know how my school were able to get Things Fall Apart in as one of the books we read, but this could also be in, I do share this from time to time depending on the context, but this could also be because I went to a private school for secondary school. So there is a lot more scope to do things however they want in a private school because, it's an independent school as opposed to it being in the state sector. And I think having been to both, I've been to a state school and I've been to an independent school, I've seen the nuances between the two within the quality of education, range of different things. And I think the freedom to include a few more things within the IGCSE syllabus wasn't something I necessarily saw within the GCSE syllabus. So for instance, with my English literature, was it language? I can't remember which one. I did an oral exam. I can't remember the name specifically of that qualification, but I did an oral exam, for instance, and I loved it. Others hated it because, the fear of speaking, the fear of public speaking. But actually, everyone that did, at least in the context that I know of, that did the qualification, were able to say it helped them, with confidence to recite spoken word, or I think it was to recite a piece of poetry. And I think if we can have things like that within the curriculum, it doesn't necessarily always have to be as well that we're learning about things from particular cultures or backgrounds, but also the representation, the curriculum as well as including aspects of society that we're not always privy to understanding about on a day-to-day basis within the curriculum. And I think one of the barriers is actually the time to research the material that's going in, for the policymakers that are, creating the curriculum. It's actually finding the time to look for things that could stimulate, representation, or foster engagement with the students. Another barrier I definitely say as well with representation, the curriculum, is that the teachers themselves who will have to teach these subjects or teach the material don't even have an understanding of it themselves. And so again, it means there's a barrier, or if they are teaching it, they don't always teach it with understanding. Sometimes they're mistaught. And so those again are barriers, because maybe sometimes teachers don't feel comfortable to teach on certain topics. I know when we were reading Things Fall Apart, my teacher was always like, if I want to drop a few gems. And I was like, if I'm honest, like, this is not my culture. Yes, the book is based in Nigeria a very long time ago, but I'm also not of that specific tribe. So even me, myself, I'm learning new things on the go. But I think one thing that my English teacher did really well was things she didn't know, we would all research together. And so one of the barriers that I think I can notice with teachers, or at least within the curriculum, is that sometimes it's because teachers don't have the awareness, they don't have the knowledge, And so it's like, let's just stick to something that's generic for everyone to learn, or a misunderstanding. And so again, we don't have that representation. Should I move over to the next prong, or?
No, I'd like to pick up on a couple of bits there, if I may. Thank you for that. Yeah, so you're right about the time thing. First of all, I think it's really hard thing to do. I recently worked on a project. So it was really interesting that this librarian got in touch, who's based in the Pacific Northwest of the US. And she was quite dismayed at some of the books that were going through her library. And she was speaking with some local history teachers, and she described it at one point, I believe, as she said it feels like they were telling lies about Christopher Columbus to indigenous children, right? And they were just like, this doesn't feel good, and we need to stop doing it. And we need to educate the teachers. And so they managed to, just between them, they applied for some funding and they got it. And then I helped them with the implementation side. I did this implementation training with them, and they've run this project, and it's going amazingly well. And it's running across the whole district, or a few districts up in Vancouver. And it's been a massive success, but it took like something like $40,000 of funding and huge amounts of time, and they were getting like local historians to come in, and because they didn't even know what was the history of Black people in that part of the country. They didn't even know the local history, and they were supposed to be teaching it to the kids. And so it was this massive undertaking, and like you say, in a very under-resourced system, time and money are in short supply. And so that's a biggie, and that's a sort of a logistical one. And then you mentioned autonomy and independent schools having more autonomy, for example, in the IGCSE. So that seems to be quite clearly the case. That the texts are set by exam boards, aren't they, at GCSE still?
Yes.
And so there's not a great deal of flexibility there. If it's on the exam, you have to teach it, and so the exam boards have huge amount of power over representation there. And then we've already talked about the teachers themselves not having an understanding of this necessarily. So there's a lot to do, just on the curriculum front.
Yes, there is. And I have somewhere in my notes, I'm going to actually try and get it up. I had it whilst you were going through the points, that actually when I'd prepared to speak at Rethinking Ed, I did just some general research around, is there anyone doing anything at the moment? And I'd read about an assistant head teacher and curriculum leader. I think it's St. Bonaventure's. Excuse me if I pronounced it wrong. It's in East London. And the lady is called Wanu. And she spoke about her experience of creating a working group within that school. And she detailed she'd created a working group at her school that looked to diversifying the curriculum and ensuring that the student population was properly representative. And the way they'd gone about this was through ensuring wide range of contextual resources, displays, books, quotes, and different things to ensure that the school were starting to put ideas together on how they could diversify the curriculum. And I thought that's quite interesting. And I've just seen, actually, I lifted that last part from Zahira Chowdhury, which I think she was meant to speak, or she did speak, I can't remember, at the Rethinking Ed conference. But I really loved her article she wrote about, it was titled Inclusion, Is Your Classroom a Safe Space? And those last things I just listed were some of the things she put in the article on how we can practically diversify even the classroom within itself. And I thought that was really interesting. So at the end, I will just again share some of the resources that I listed within the talk that I gave. But yes, I think I loved Wanu's case study because actually having a working group of teachers all coming together where one, they're learning about how they could diversify the curriculum within their school, but two as well, just trying to see how they can better educate themselves. I thought that was a real pat on the back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, please do. Any links to anything like that, send them through, and I'll stick them in the show notes. That'd be really helpful. Thank you. All right, workforce next.
Yes.
I know I'm putting you through your paces here. How are we gonna create a more representative workforce?
Right. Well, I mentioned in my talk, actually, we can look, at the hiring process. And I may be looking, in case anyone's wondering, why do I keep turning? Because I actually have the notes up ready. And I think some of the questions that I put with the barrier is, okay, yes, we know that it's not, representative enough, but maybe one of the barriers, the hiring process, how we're going about getting teachers. So some of the questions I put together were, how does the job advert look? And is that impacting people that want to apply for the job? Does the job application cater towards more of a certain gender? Those could be also reasons why we're not having diverse, amount of people within the workforce of certain genders, because how the application itself even looks may be off-putting. Does the application use a language as well that, specifically, is towards a certain group? So those were some of the questions that I put together. That could be why we are having high amounts of, I don't think disrepresentation is even a word, but high amounts of people from a certain group.
Should be.
From a certain group, and why we have a lack of representation. I definitely think the hiring process is one. And I also think as well, why we have a lack of representation is because, people unfortunately think of teachers and they think, nah, I don't want to do that. And I'm really grateful for one of the modules I just finished taking, actually, in my final year. I got to take a non-elective module, so a non-law module. And I chose to take a module called Introduction to Teachers and Teaching, because it's something that I absolutely love, the education system. And it was so interesting to read that there are a vast amount of people who don't even think of teachers as a noble profession anymore. Yeah. Once upon a time, teachers were like, oh, teachers, oh my gosh, like, yes, you're a teacher, you're doing the work for us. Now, it's like, I don't want to be a teacher, and teachers are not getting the respect they deserve anymore. Teachers are going on strike. And those are other reasons why we don't have representation within the teacher workforce, because, media play a big part as to why some people are turned off from the profession. Circles, if you know a teacher that has left the profession, you're very unlikely to actually want to pursue that route. So there's so many factors, but I definitely think it hasn't helped that over the years, the respect that teachers want used to get, the profession used to get, has gone downhill. So in turn, it's dissuade people from wanting to get into the profession. And then two, the percentages are really high of teachers that are in the profession that just grow really tired and end up leaving. And there are many different reasons why they leave. But one of the big reasons is pay. They're not paid enough. And teachers, arguably do a very important job. They are empowering and stewarding the next generation of people. They are really the backbone of the economy. And so if they're not being paid enough, it really leaves this gap and a shortage of teachers. And then again, we have this issue then of, a lack of representation.
Yeah. Yeah, my head is spinning. There's so much. Like it's another really, really tough cookie to crack, right? Like like you say, the hiring process for sure. I remember seeing an analysis by Women Ed. I think it was Vivian Porritt and someone else who'd done an analysis of the language that's used in job adverts, especially for senior leaders, and they often use language like robust and rigorous. And like words that are often associated with more sort of like masculine. Character traits, and also like you often see them being like insanely hardworking. They're like you start at 7 a.m, you finish at 10 p.m, and that's what it takes. And if you don't have what it takes, look elsewhere, sort of thing. So there's this weird, almost like this sort of like an SAS kind of mentality of like. It's sort of wrapped up in the language of moral purpose. So
I do thank God, though, that actually most teachers don't go into the profession because of, if it was because of the money, we wouldn't have any teachers. But a lot of teachers are, teachers because they actually want to make an impact. Yeah. Because they really do believe in, investing in those young people, teaching them. I have friends who are either going through a teacher program, so going down the PGC qualification route, or who actually do desire in the future to become teachers. And it's always so heartwarming when I hear their reasons for why. It's always very altruistic reasons. They want to make a difference. They want to impact the next generation. But then there also comes the time where, especially with women, and we learned this in the module that I took, that when they then decide they actually want to have children, are pregnant, a lot of the times they then start thinking, is it sustainable? Can I then come back? What's the pay like? And those are also other things that, affect representation, because sometimes for some women, it's like, there just isn't enough scope for me to balance it. I work long hours and I still have a baby. How am I going to do it? So those are other things as well to consider.
Sure. Yes. I mean, it's a difficult thing to regulate that, isn't it? Like at the moment. So when people run an advert, to go back to the adverts thing, like that's not moderated, is it? Like it doesn't have to go through some sort of filter in order to say, well, that's exclusionary language that you're using. It's like that's going to turn people off. That's not, you're not going to get a representative sample of applications. And we also know about the way that race plays out, right? The way that, like there's been lots of studies done, haven't there, where you send out 10 CVs or 10 job applications with an English sounding name and a foreign sounding name, and the English ones get callbacks and the foreign sounding names don't. That's a huge issue as well, which again comes back down to education within the teaching workforce. But so that's a tough one to crack. I can picture what the right wing colonists would have a field day if people suggested that not that we should decide what we should or shouldn't do based on the opinions of right wing colonists, but if people suggested that we should moderate the language that are used in teacher jobs, and any sort of controls on speech are fiercely contested, aren't they? And understandably so. But it's a difficult thing to see how that's going to shift the dial on that. And it's it's really important. It's like a rate limiting step, like the language that's used in those adverts. And like you say, teacher retention is a huge issue, and workload is a huge issue. And so if people are saying you're going to have to work 80 hours a week if you're going to succeed in this environment, that's going to turn lots of people off.
Yes.
Don't know how you fix that. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. And it isn't something that I expect we're going to have answers to overnight. But it is something we do need to start looking at. So we've addressed and we've seen there are issues. How can we start putting the puzzle back together, but not just back together so we have the same issues again, but actually how can we start reorganizing a puzzle that looks slightly different to what we have now? And I'm a big believer in intergenerational collaboration. I really believe there's so much benefits that every generation can bring to the table when every generation's at it, cross-generation collaboration. And I really think when it comes to education, every generation should be represented at a decision-making table.
Totally.
You can get some experience and some insights from someone in year 9. You can get some experience from someone who is in year 13, someone who's at university, someone who's further up in, work. There's so many different insights we can glean from each other. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about, education, reforming it. That actually, if we just paid attention a bit more to young decision makers and included all of us at the table as well, we might be able to start bringing solutions together, start weaving concepts together. But it's only when it's convenient sometimes we call upon young voices. Otherwise, it's not always, beckoned on. And it is changing now. But I think if we really want to start putting solutions in place, it needs to be a cross-generational conversation, because young people are affected just as much as older generations are affected. So that's what I think.
Let's move on to the you bit, right? I'm really interested in this podcast in getting to know the people that I'm speaking to.
Sure.
And to understand your perspective and your worldview and the sort of the things that have really shaped you as a person, either in education or the sort of the significant moments that have shaped you along the way. And so let's start with the beginning of you. You mentioned briefly that you went to a few different types of school. Where did you go to school? What kind of a student were you when you were younger?
Okay, so very quickly, I went to 3 different primary schools. One was in another area of London, and then we'd moved to East London. And then the first 2 were state, and then the last one from year 5 to year 6 was actually a prep school. So prep school is an independent primary school. And yeah, there was just a huge shift I could already see. And I went to an all girls prep school. So from year 5 to year 6, that was all girls. Prior to that, I'd been with mixed school. And then secondary school was a mixed independent school, but it was single sex only classes. So we were a mixed school, but when it came to teach classroom, we were only taught as single sex, so women and men as classroom. And then sixth form, I went to a state selective sixth form. And so I really have had the nice, mixture, and it's made me appreciate my education more, but it's even made me push harder for, change, because I've seen how good quality of education can be, at least with my secondary school and also actually with my sixth form. So I think you asked me, how was I as a student or as a child? For the most part, I was a good child, good student. I would definitely say from very young, I've always been very confident, very self-assured. I've always, been very comfortable with my skin. And it's, during secondary school, it did attract a bit of hate. I did go through a couple of years. I was constantly, having some arguments with some guys. I was that girl that wouldn't usually argue with girls. I was a bit more notorious with the guys. And I think it was just because they saw a girl who is very confident and loud and opinionated. And so it's like, like, how can we get at her? But I think moving throughout the whole of education, I've just always been a natural leader. It's been in all my reports that, if Ife's always led well and always communicated well. And I think that's really shaped who I am now and who I'm becoming. I'm starting to see a lot more of those traits play out. I would say from time to time I was a bit cheeky with some of my teachers, and inquisitive. If I had a question, I'd ask. And I think the people skills that I have now, it's just part of my personality. I love people, love socializing with people, meeting new people, which also meant that I was able to build relationships very quickly with my teachers. A lot of the times I used to catch up with teachers, we'd have little like gossip sessions, even though I'm not proud of that. I was that student that, enjoyed school. I enjoyed my subjects, and I built good relationships with my teachers, put myself forward for things. And yeah, like I definitely would say my experience with school was positive. I didn't really have anything that made me think, oh, I didn't really like school. And I think it's because I had good support systems. My secondary school were really good, in my opinion. It's different for everyone, it's very relative. But in my opinion, I thought the support system was great. I had my form tutor, I had my headmistress that I could always go to, turn to if I ever had an issue. So that's just a bit of a flavor as to schooling for me, and a bit of my personality, at least when it came to school.
And did you go straight through to uni, or did you have a year out?
Yeah, so I went straight to university. I was the year of COVID, when COVID, struck our grades. And without getting into my story too much, I didn't actually get into the university I wanted to go to. The plan was to go to Durham. I, secured the grades and everything. Then it came to results day, and yeah, results day had another plan. But at the end of the day, that's just where God didn't want me there. And I came to Southampton. But yes, I went straight into university after sixth form.
Right. Okay. Yeah, interesting. And so you mentioned God there, and I know that your faith is very important. And I wonder if this is going to feature in the next question, which is about this idea of significant learning. Like, what are the sort of the big ideas that have shaped you and your life along the way?
Yeah, 100% faith. And so for anyone who maybe doesn't know, if you follow me on any platform, you'll probably know somehow, somewhere, okay, yeah, she's a Christian. And through and through, very proud to share that I'm follow Christ, and that's always been my stance. I gave my life to Christ, which is like the official, deciding that you want to pursue your faith at 18. So prior to that, I was born in a Christian household. Yeah, I'd say I was a Christian, but I didn't really have a true relationship understanding up until 18. From there, sorry, not 18, 16. From there, everything kind of just changed. I was like, I really want to be intentional about this. But I'd say a big part of, my understandings, values, principles comes from my faith. I really can't say anything more than I wouldn't be where I am without having a genuine relationship with Christ. He's been able to inform decisions that I make. And I really believe the reason why I'm so confident in who I am and my identity is because I have that, assurance that, yeah, this is, who I believe and this is my faith. Other aspects of, significant learning that has really shaped who I am today. My parents, just really thank God for them. They're fantastic support systems to have. Really invested in myself and my sister, and both parents did it in various ways, but they really did invest. My parents, aren't the richest, but they just decided that actually we want to give our daughters good education. And so they'd fork money that they didn't always have to be able to pay the school fees. And I really, really, value that and honor the fact that they did that for us. It's, helped a long way. So parents, I'd also say I had fantastic teachers. I've had teachers that have just always said, yeah, there's something about you, so we're gonna just, support you. Good support systems all around. But I think also I've just, my values and principles, something I just don't play with. I'm quite principled with how I see things, how I see life. And then also, because other people have invested in me, it's just naturally made me also want to invest in others. I'm a big believer in empowering other people, showing up for people, and being loud about whatever it is you believe, but being loud about it in a way that's informed. Because you can be loud and you can be wrong, but you can be loud and also, know how to articulate your points and be right about things. And so I just have always believed I've got a voice, I'm going to use it. Not everyone will like it, but I also don't mind being an anomaly. I'm actually okay with being different. I know I'm different. And something I was having a conversation with a friend recently is actually, I really believe I'm a bit of a disruptor. I like to see how I can shake up the system and bring something different to it. And it wasn't until a few years ago I really noticed. Before I was like, why am I always just so different? I'm okay with just, shaking things up. And it's only until recently I realized that actually it's just a part of a personality trait that I have, that I'm quite visionary. Like I see things and I'm like, okay, we can change it in this way and let's disrupt it a bit like this. And those are all just parts of DNA that I have, my personality. But yes, my faith is, really important to me. My parents have done a really good job with myself, my sisters. And I've just got really good support systems that I'm really grateful to have.
Thank you. Fascinating. Well, Jesus was a little disruptive, wasn't he, in his time? So
he was. So yeah, he really was. And I mean, so every day you hear of someone who says, I'm, going to die on the cross, save everyone's sins. It's not something you hear of all the time. And I think also everyone has their unique, selling points. Everyone will be able to tell, okay, I'm good at this or I'm good at that. And I think every visionary knows they're a visionary. There's just a way you can tell. Like you see things, you're like, I have a vision. I want to change this. How can we change this? And sometimes I think it makes me restless because of that aspect of me that likes to disrupt things. I'm always like, I'm not quite content with this. How can I change this? So yeah, it's a process. I'm learning.
Thank you. It's interesting. I don't think that I've had anybody else on the podcast, I'm trying to recall, who's spoken openly about faith in that way and the impact that it has on them. And it's obviously it's more rare now than it used to be, right? Like we're a lot more of a secular country than we used to be. But as we spoke about recently when we had our sort of little off air chat, I've started to think a lot more about religion and faith recently, partly through some books that I've been listening to on audio by a guy called Rupert Sheldrake, who's coming on the podcast soon. I'm delighted to say, who's a really interesting guy. He's a scientist who's sort of like a heretical scientist. I don't know if you've come across him before.
No, I haven't actually.
So he did a TED talk, which was banned by TED for supposedly being anti-scientific. Like he wrote a book called The Science Delusion, which was his answer to Richard Dawkins's book, The God Delusion. And he's a really interesting guy, and he's written 2 books recently. One was called Science and Spiritual Practices, and one's called Ways to Go Beyond and Why They Work. And each of them looks at 7 different things that people can do to take them to what he calls beyond human consciousness. And so it's things like prayer and meditation, fasting. There's a chapter on psychedelics. There's one on pilgrimages. There's all kinds of different things that he looks at. But he's just really sort of made me start to think a lot more, just with more curiosity, right? And more sort of we spoke about this last week, didn't we? About how, because I was a scientist, and it was the same path that Sheldrake went down. He was raised as a Christian, and then when he got to university and started studying science, it was just like everybody who's a scientist is an atheist, basically. It's sort of like a package deal, it seems. And he became an atheist for a while, and then sort of rekindled his faith later on. And that was my position. I sort of felt like faith is ridiculous. It's this sort of superstitious, sort of just outdated way of understanding the world, and I was very sort of intolerant and quite skeptical and cynical about the whole thing. And I still sort of think that it's just, I mean, it's an unbelievable thing, isn't it? That this story of Christ. So I went to midnight mass this year with my son, and you know, just thinking about the story of Christ and the fact that, you know, 2,000 years later, there are people who are still talking about this in these churches. It's still going. The numbers are dwindling, but he's hanging in there, and it's just unbelievable, isn't it? That is the case, and it's easy to be skeptical about it, but it's just like deeply interesting to me now in a way that it wasn't before. And the meaning that people extract from the Gospels and from his teaching and from other religions as well. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be having this conversation.
It is. One thing I don't, shy away from is, talking about your faith. Everyone has aspects of themselves that, they really want to share with the world. And I think for me, the way I see it is, coming from scripture, that I'll paraphrase, that essentially this scripture says that within us, we have Christ, and Christ is bigger than anything in the world. And I've always kind of seen myself as one of those people that I want to go into spaces and shine light. As Christians, we're called to be a light, and I want to go to spaces and shine the light. And it may not always be comfortable for people, and it may not always be comfortable for myself either, to actually go and, be open. But sometimes as Christians, we're not always going to actually, preach with words that, yes, I'm a Christian, but actually by your actions. And I've found with a lot of the spaces that I'm navigating now, I'm not always having to say actually that I'm a Christian. And although I'm very loud about it, sometimes actually the very first thing someone realizes or looks at is how I act. And then they say, oh, you're a Christian. Oh, okay, that's why you do this. And I've seen that you're very different to everyone else. And I'm proud that I'm like, yes. It also means, though, that the minute you declare you're a Christian, people are watching you like, she thinks she's a Christian, right? But I think with everyone, no matter what faith or belief you have, one thing we should encourage more is interfaith discussions, and interfaith respect, because sometimes people don't always respect other faiths or respect other religions, because for them it's like, oh, what's there to this? This is baseless. But actually, there could be things you learn from it. I'm, never afraid of sharing my faith with other believers of other faiths. because sometimes I think it gives me an awareness of, what they believe. But at the same time, I also believe what I believe, and, that's not changing. So it should be a thing where everyone comes together and actually let's be a bit more culturally sensitive, like I said. But yeah, in a world where it's unpopular at times to discuss your faith, I and many others will ride the banner of actually we will discuss our faith. And I really do pray for a time where this country will be open again about its Christian roots, because I know, like you said, it was declared a couple of years ago that United Kingdom has become a secular, or is it United Kingdom or England? I don't want to generalize which one, but that, yeah, we've become a secular nation. So I await the time, but yeah, I am very open about it. And, thank you for also giving me the space to talk about my faith.
Yeah, I'm really, really pleased to do that. It's really interesting, and I mean, there are just so many sort of benefits of it. So, like, I was raised in a Catholic tradition, and I was quite involved as a kid. I was an altar boy, and I was in the folk group and stuff, and there, a lot of it just sort of passed over my head. I don't think that I sort of later really became an atheist as such. Rather that I didn't feel like the church had ever really done a particularly good job of explaining to me in ways that you can understand as a child what it actually is that they believe. I didn't really know what the catechism was or what that meant, or the Eucharist and the creed thing that people read out and they sort of chant mindlessly each week. And I believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. It's like I still don't really know what those words mean. And so I felt quite sort of detached from it. But regardless of the beliefs, there are certain things that you get out of having a faith, like singing together with people, which often people don't do unless you're in a choir. Prayer often doesn't happen. There are all kinds of health benefits. People who have faith tend to live longer. They get less ill, right? There's more community around them. There are all kinds of interesting sort of offshoots of having a religious dimension to your life. I think Gandhi talked about the desert of atheism. He was just like, I sort of played with it for a while, but there's just so like no nourishment there compared with the nourishment that you can get from having a life of faith. And you can interpret that in any number of ways. And so I'm just, like I say, I wouldn't go so far as to say that I have developed a faith or rekindled a faith, but I'm definitely become a lot more curious about it, and I'm looking at lots of different practices from different faiths and just seeing what's out there at the moment, I guess.
And I pray for you that you will find what it is you're looking for. In my experience, I was just like, yeah, I want to know, who is this God? Reveal yourself to me. And that's all you need sometimes. Just that you just need that desire, and everything else falls in place. And honestly, like you said, doing life with Christ is so wholesome. Like, just knowing that, in the tough and the good and the bad, in any time, it's consistent that he's there. It's consistent that I have access to the Holy Spirit. Like, I just, for me, it's like, it's so wholesome. And it just sometimes starts with a desire, because for me, I was like, I've grown up in a Christian household, and a lot of friends and people I know can all resonate that, yeah, we've grown up in it, but we didn't really understand. You go to church, you feel the motions, but you just don't really understand. But there has to come a time where the individual themselves is like, actually, enough is enough. If you're real, and I just want to know, if you're real, God, if you're there, show yourself to me. And when I had my experience, I was like, well, that's me now. And it's been a journey since, but it just starts with a desire. And I really just pray for others as well that are in between, still considering, that God meets them where they are. But yeah, it's not always the easiest. I know when you've grown up in a background, it doesn't even have to be Christian, where you've just grown up in a religious background and things weren't always explained, and you're just here like, what does this mean? Why do we believe this? And it's always hard as well when no one really has proper answers, and you're just like, yeah, I don't get this. But yeah, that's my heartfelt prayer for you. Yeah.
Thank you. Are you happy to talk about that? Please don't feel obliged if it's a private thing. But when you said that you were looking for a sign and you feel like you had an experience that was sort of confirming data for you, are you happy to discuss that?
Yeah, I wouldn't even go as far to say as like was confirming data. I think for me, I've just growing up in that Christian background, I knew God was real, yes, all these things. But I wanted to have my own personal experience, and that's really what any Christian should desire, that you have a personal relationship with Christ, with God. So I wanted it. I didn't want to know God from my parents or any. I wanted to have my own relationship. So I was actually at a youth conference that my church was hosting, and a young lady was just worshiping and ministering, and it was at that moment I literally just felt a tug in my heart, like, you know what, this is the moment. Like, I felt like God was knocking on my heart, and I was like, I was crying, all these things. And so I don't, obviously, we don't make this podcast too long because I can really go in depth, but I just felt that was the moment where actually I really did feel like a lot of the questions that I was crying out for were being answered in that moment. And yeah, that was October of 2018. And here we are now in January of 2024, and I still feel like it's one of the best decisions I've made. And yeah, and I'm seeing a rise, an increase in a lot more young Christians that are rising up and are being a bit more comfortable and confident in their faith. Because that's another thing. Some people also don't always feel comfortable to share for various reasons. But I know for young people, it's like, oh, is it cool, like, to be like, oh, I'm a Christian? And I'm like, it's your faith. You should be proud to wear it.
Right.
And you don't have to really worry about what other people think, because it's not about other people, it's your personal decision. So yeah, I'm seeing an increase now in a lot more young Christians who are just being comfortable and confident about it. But in doing that as well, I'm a big believer of let's be respectable and respectful of other religions, other faiths, and let's learn from each other.
Yeah.
Some of my closest friends are Muslim, and it's always so nice when we all sit down and like, yeah, like, oh, so you prayed, oh, like, how do you, it's always really nice.
It is, and it's endlessly fascinating. Just as a final point on this, there's something that I came across recently that I found really interesting. There's a book by someone called Karen Armstrong called A History of God, and she was a nun for years, like 20 years or something. And she was like you, she was sort of saying, "Give me a sign, like let me just know for real that this is not just that I'm not on the wrong path, as it were." And she never got that sign, and she ended up stopping. She left. She stopped being a nun, and then she started reading a lot of of biblical, like, scholarly work. And she said that she was really surprised to find that for lots of biblical scholars, that God is a work of the imagination, that it's something that is sort of that we engender. So people sometimes, and that doesn't mean that it's not real, that it's sort of that there's something that isn't really meaningful happening. But when you pray, for example, if it feels like it doesn't make sense, prayer doesn't make sense unless there's a thing to which you are praying that you genuinely believe it to be real. But you can open up a dialogue, and even if that is something that's happening within your own mind or within your own subconscious mind or whatever it is, the fact that you're engaging in that process opens up possibilities to you that were closed off before. But it really struck me as something that was interesting, that like it doesn't have to be this sort of this childlike understanding of like the so-called man with the big beard in the clouds who sort of looks down benevolently or not so benevolently on what people are up to in judgment and all of that. That's one way of thinking about it, but another way is to think about this as a work of the creative imagination, right? And for some people, that's what Christ was. Like the William Blake version of Christianity is that the angels and the saints and whatever it's a work of the creative imagination.
I think one last thing I'll say is that, I mean, generally the Christian faith operates on faith. So you're believing in something that you can't see. To any human mind, it's like this doesn't, and most religions, not all, but most religions also operate on the basis that you're believing in something you can't see. And to the human normal mind, it's like, actually, I don't even want to say normal, because what is normal? But to most humans, you're thinking, how does this even make sense? Like, how are you believing in something you can't see? But a scripture that I love so much says that faith is actually hoping in things not yet seen. And it's like the evidence of things you can't see at all, but you know it's going to happen. And that's what, the Christian faith is all about. That, yeah, it seems crazy, but we can't use our human mind to think about these things, because we will constantly just be like, what? Like, we'll always just, our human mind is limited. And that's where the faith aspect comes in, that, you choose to believe that, even though I can't see it, or, if it's to do with a situation, you can't see that thing yet, I choose to believe that you will come through for me. And that's the basis of the entire Christian faith, that you're not seeing, God as it is, or Christ as it is. But you're choosing to believe that because of the God that I know I've had an encounter with, I am going to believe. And it's marvelous, because, many people ask me, like, are you sure? Like, how would you even believe in something you can't see? It doesn't make sense. And I'm like, I'm telling you, it doesn't make sense, but that's actually the beauty of it, because it doesn't make sense to the normal mind is thinking how, but you almost have to, allow yourself to just, be guided and say, actually, I choose to believe that this can happen. And yeah, it's a beautiful journey. So we'll continue to have our conversations, obviously outside of the podcast, but I was very excited to hear when you did mention to me that, oh, okay, you are considering again and you're looking. And I thought, I really will continue to pray. But yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm glad we had that bit of the conversation. I didn't intend to go down the God hole, as it were, but there we go.
That is good for you, honestly.
That's good for you, showing up where you least expect it. So let's do this last thing as a quick fire round now, because we'll wrap this up in the next few minutes. 3 questions for you.
Okay.
Positives, problem, solution. So like maybe one from each category. You said earlier that there's loads of good stuff happening in the school system. Pick one that you would like to shine a spotlight on.
Okay, I would say one of the positives, although it's not happening in abundance, is actually the diversity of CPD training that I've been hearing a lot more about. CPD training on diversity and inclusion, DEI, on SEND, on quite a few areas that weren't obviously coming up beforehand. There still could be more, but I definitely say that's one area that I'm like, this is a positive, that I'm seeing a lot more going on, but at least in the state sector, there's been a lot more CPD training on those areas. A bit more of a renewed focus as well, coming up now on prioritizing learners' mental health. Although we have a crisis, and I'm even careful to use crisis, because I'm like, oh, I really don't even want that to be a thing. But although, yes, we are seeing that there is a massive, massive problem with teachers and students, I do think conversations are now happening within schools about mental health. When I was at school, it wasn't really something I knew that much about. And I think it was because we had such a great support system. But now there are conversations happening. And I think it's because of just how bad it's gotten. Schools are now like, okay, we need to address this. How can we help our students? How can we help our teachers? So that's a positive. And then I think you now asked about a negative, isn't it? Or is it a solution?
Yeah, they're sort of two halves of the same coin, really. But like, what do you think is the major challenge that we face currently in education? And then the second bit is how can we fix that? Or what's the beginning of a fix?
Yeah. Okay, so off the bat, one of the main challenges I think for me is students aren't prepared for life outside of education. A way we can combat this, I think, would be having a bit more within the curriculum for students to explore life outside of exams, and reforming the assessment system that we've got going at the moment. Students are really just taught for exams. And we've seen from a lot of data, there is a massive skills shortage at the moment. And it's weird, because it's like we make up the future economy, but there's a massive gap at the moment. So I think one of the ways we can start to address this is, one, looking to our curriculum like we've discussed at the start. How can we change it up? Two, reforming the assessment type that we've got going on at the moment. And then maybe three as well, a new area that started coming up a bit more in discussions are digital learner profiles. And I can't talk too much about it because my knowledge on it is still very minuscule. I'm still learning a bit more at the moment. But creating profiles, digital profiles about learners that are a bit more holistic, really does help, at least on that front. But yes, preparing students for life outside of education helps. So maybe having a bit more in the curriculum about budgeting, about debts, finances, mortgages, actual skills like confidence building, public speaking, oration. Those really do help because some students inevitably will not go on to university. Some want to go down the degree route, degree apprenticeship route. Others may go off and start a side hustle or a business. We are seeing a lot more of a rise with Gen Z having their own businesses. So I think those are ways we could start to combat that challenge. And I know it will happen, but yeah, that's definitely a really big challenge that I can say off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and there are lots of people who are working on these problems, right? The Rethinking Assessment group are doing some really good work. I know you're doing some work with Edge Foundation around some of these ideas, which is good to see. Yeah, I think just way more choice, I think, is one thing. Like, I think that if we had, like, you said earlier that you just done your module tests, like we don't do modules in schools, but you could do that, couldn't you? You could have a module of robotics. You could have a module, like you say, that's just like just a little 6-week course on oratory, right? So you just go really into it. Or debating, say, like something like debating, something that happens loads. I was in a quite an expensive private independent school yesterday, and they had one of those big wooden boards up where they had engraved the winners of the debating championship for all the previous years. And one of the things when I talk to state schools, they sort of say like, it's really time consuming. It's quite hard to find the time to figure out how to teach debating within the context of a busy curriculum, because it takes a long time to prepare for the debate. And then if let's say you have a debate in a lesson where there's 2 people arguing for the motion, 2 against, and there's one other kid chairing. So there's 5 kids in speaking roles. And let's say it takes 3 lessons to 2 lessons to prepare it, and then 1 lesson to actually do the debate. That's 3 lessons for 1/6 of the kids in that class to take part in the debate. So you would have to have 18 lessons just so that every kid could take part in a debate once. And so just like the time taken to develop those skills in the curriculum isn't there. But if you had like a 6-week or like whatever it was, a little unit, little module, little nano course, it's just like, right, let's just do an in-depth thing. We're just going to do debating loads, and we're going to get everybody to get really skilled up in that, and then we can do other stuff. And you can chop and change things. You can pick up a topic and then you can drop it and you can do something else, or you can go on to a higher level if you want. I think we could have a much more bespoke curriculum that's sort of plug and play, try different things out in different combinations. That seems to me to be a good way to create a much more, like you say, and to prepare people for a world beyond the school gates, where the world isn't divided. There's no like geography factory, is there? Or like a history, business that you can go and work for. It's like the world is really interconnected, and you have to learn skills very quickly because there's no jobs for life anymore. It seems to me that would be a good way of preparing people for the world of work.
The world, yes, indeed.
Yeah. Indeed. And so, speaking of that, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me, especially in your final year of a degree. Your time management skills must be unbelievable if you can carve out an afternoon for a podcast.
No, I live by my planner. My planner it's not with me now, but I have a massive fat planner. But time management is a skill that you just continuously have to hone. And when you're juggling so many plates, it's a must that you are good with your time. But the pleasure's mine. I'm really, really honored that you invited me to be on the podcast. I absolutely loved my time at the Rethinking Ed conference. And I'm really hoping as well that hopefully our conversation will spark some new ideas within the listeners, and get some conversations going, but beyond conversations, that we can start creating some sustainable change as well.
Here. I like the sound of that. All right. Thank you so much, Ife. It's been lovely to speak with you. And until the next time.
All right, then. Thank you very much.
That was great. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
That was really, really nice.
We have a narrow curriculum which squeezes out the arts. So let's rethink education. There is a lack of imagination and not enough fun. So let's rethink education. Children should be self-directed, showing us their way. Let them lead. Transferable skills should be the core of what we teach. Learn for life. So let's try. Let's be brave. Let's do what's right and not what is required. Let's have fun. Let's explore. Let's bring back the love. Forget the fear of being fired. We're forced to rank the children as Ofsted ranks the schools. So let's rethink education. We have a lack of agency. We're trapped inside the system. So let's rethink education. A place of transformation that embraces community. School is the heart. A place to dream, a place to play, a place to think and love. Feeling free. So let's trust, let's be brave. Let's do what's right and not what is required. Let's have fun, let's explore. Let's bring back the love, forget the fear of being fired. Let's trust, let's be brave. Let's do what's right and not what is required.